Čau, já jsem Michal a připravil jsem si pro vás rozhovor s jedním děsně zajímavým člověkem, jím Jessica Serran, umělkyně a kreativní koučka z Kanady, která žije v Praze. A bavili jsme se hlavně o tom, jak nakopnout svoji kreativní kariéru jako umělec nebo kreativní profesionál. So, Jessica, hi. Thank you that you accepted my invitation for this interview. And let's start. Where do you come from and why did you go to Prague?
Well, I'm originally from Ontario, Canada, and there's a couple of reasons why I ended up in Prague. Back in 2009, I actually went to Tabor to do an artist residency. So it was my opportunity to come to Europe and have some time to make art. And then there was a couple of other aspects to it. So I actually have Slovak ancestors, so I really wanted to spend some time in this part of the world. And I'd always been interested in the past and where I came from. So I decided I would spend a little bit more time here, but then during the residency, I fell in love with somebody. And one thing led to another. I decided to, I traveled around with my mom and actually found some relatives. And then during that time, I decided I would try to make this relationship work and stay here longer. But it didn't take long before the relationship started going downhill quickly. But during that time, I got a grant from the Canadian government to do an art project about this country. And so I decided to move to Prague and get started on the art project. And I've been here ever since.
Yeah. By the way, great project. I read the book and it's really cool.
Thank you. Thank you.
And why Prague? Why do you still live here? And are you going to stay here for some more time?
You know, we'll see, but it's one of these things where the project ended up taking a lot longer than I imagined. So by the time I was finished, it was already 3 years into me being here. And that's kind of a critical moment to be in a new place because at that point I knew enough people and opportunities started opening up that career-wise, it would be a terrible moment to leave and not take advantage of those things. But I feel like Prague has been a really good city for me. It's given me a chance to develop a lot of things and meet some amazing people. And it's also, the lifestyle here makes it really possible to be an artist and to do the things I'm doing. So all of those things combined, plus along the way, I connected to family and relatives. So I actually feel quite rooted here in certain ways.
Well, people usually say that Prague isn't so expensive, but it's still a great city to live in and to create here.
It is, yeah. I mean, it's not as expensive if you were further west, and you can easily get to those places. So it's a really nice location, and I like the city.
Yeah, and so that's your art. And what made you to dive into the world of coaching or mentoring for creatives, for artists?
Well, everything I do kind of falls into my lap more than me making a decision to pursue something. So back in 2012, I started studying business and marketing, actually because a therapist suggested that maybe that would be something that would support my career. So I started diving into that world, and a lot of the people I was connecting to and really resonated with how they approached the world of business and marketing were coaches. And people really involved in personal transformation work. And so I started to get engaged in that world and actually found that I was more inspired by what those people were doing than a lot of what I was seeing in the art world. And so slowly but surely, I also, realized I've kind of been functioning like a coach or a therapist my entire life. So it just became this natural fit. And also because I make art and I'm interested in art, but more than that, I'm interested in the creative process and what's really required for somebody to create or to bring something new into the world. So it just became this natural progression for me to also then start supporting other people doing the things that I had spent so long figuring out how to do.
Okay. So what do you think is the secret behind the success of your career as an artist?
I think fearless tenacity, just really being willing to go for something, and I would say not taking no for an answer.
Yeah.
So just being committed and deciding that I'll figure it out somehow, really.
So learning and learning along the way.
Constantly. I mean, that, and I think something, I couldn't have identified this question or this being essentially what I was doing all along, but in some way I've always taken the things that weren't working or the things that I was struggling with and started asking interesting questions about it. You know, what's right about this that I'm not understanding? Or how can I take this and transform it into something useful? And so I think I've been doing that both in the artwork itself and with my career the entire time. And just constantly saying, okay, like, based on the experiences I've had and the things that I'm struggling with, what else is possible? How can I really actually use this to create?
Okay. Your mentees are mostly artists, like the artists. I don't know how many freelance artists, like designers or illustrators, have you met? But do you think that there is a big difference between succeeding as an artist and this freelance artist or craftsman?
I think that they're different worlds and that it's important to understand each. The thing that I think many fine artists fail to think about that more freelance artists or designers are trained to think about is who is my work really for and what are their needs? So I'm definitely not an advocate of, let's say, fine artists making work to try to please somebody or based on what they think somebody else wants. But I think at some point a fine artist also needs to think about, you know, is my work designed and going to fit into the contemporary art world? And if so, which pocket of the contemporary art world? Just like a designer would say, who's my target audience or who's my work really for? And then starting to understand that demographic. So I think that they're very different, but that each needs to really take some time to understand, like, what is my work really doing? Who is it for? And how can I then get it in front of those people?
Okay. Excellent.
Yeah.
It's common to hear this term, starving artist. Can you say something about this?
Definitely. I mean, I used to identify as a starving artist, and most of the artists I work with do. And I think that there's certainly a great challenge for artists to figure out how to actually do what they love and the thing that they're most passionate about, and how to start making money. And it's a worthy challenge. The thing I've discovered is that as artists, what we really have to do is both the internal work to look at what are our beliefs and what is our mindset and our relationship to money and wealth and having things, but then also gain some really practical hard skills to do with, you know, selling or pricing your art or finding your collectors. So I find that when artists can start to do both of those things in tandem, things really start to shift.
Yeah. And this relationship to the money, I know that a lot of people have this bad relationship to the money. Like, if you have a lot of money, it's bad. You probably robbed somebody. Or can you say something about this? What's your experience?
My experience is I've also had to do a lot of internal work to come to some understandings that work for me and to have a healthy relationship with money. So I think that unfortunately we see a lot of examples of people who have gotten money doing things that, you know, aren't moral, aren't kind, or considerate to others. But I think that doesn't have to be the case, especially nowadays. And something that really helped me was to think about, well, what if artists, creative people, people who wanted to help others or had a passion for service, community, any of these things, what if that group of people actually had money? What then becomes possible if we use it in a way that is to benefit and serve other people?
Is it connected with the term healing in your teaching?
Yeah, absolutely. I think all of the people I work with, and I think for so many artists in general, we care so much about other people and the world around us. I think we're naturally designed to look at the world and see what's not working and have a different perspective. So with the artists I work with, and myself included, we've had to do a lot of internal healing work of our own. But then it seems like once you do that, there's this natural desire to start helping others, call it helping or healing or giving back, whatever it is. But I think that the two become quite intimately connected. And so once we figured out how to work through our own stuff, I find a lot of artists and just people in general, then we say, well, how can I share this? Like, this worked so well for me, what can I do? But the reality is that those things usually cost money.
Can you see the same problem with schools as I do? That the school spits out the artist and never teaches him how to make real money. What do you think about this?
Absolutely. I think it's quite a big problem. I don't know what the solution is. I know that there's some universities now who are starting to teach a little bit around careers, but yeah, I think it's completely overlooked, and then unfortunately artists get out and they're fumbling and scrambling and they don't really have any practical tools.
Yeah, my experience is that school usually, if it's good school, it can teach you the craft itself, composition, colors, how to use the tools and stuff. If it's a good school, it can teach you creative thinking, but the other stuff, the creative business, how to make money, how to find your target audience or clients, it's really bad.
It's really bad. Yeah, they teach how to make art, but not really how to have a career.
Yeah.
And though I will say I did have a couple of classes in college, and the truth is I wasn't even ready for it at the time. So I think it's a combination of things as well. Yeah.
So what do you think is the basic skill or skill set for an artist or a designer, freelance artist, that he needs or she needs to learn to make a solid living?
There's a couple of things. If I start out philosophically, one thing that I always encourage is, can you approach your art career as a creative act as well? So fundamentally, can you start thinking about it like it's not this separate thing that you have to do that's unpleasant and that you don't want to do, but that it could potentially be as creative as making art. So I think that's an important mindset. And then I think that, like I was saying earlier, artists really need to think about who their work is for. They need to develop some really tangible, hard skills around selling or having conversations with potential clients or collectors. I think that's really important. And then I do think that it's important to do a lot of mindset work, to get to the point where you clear out a lot of limiting beliefs and you start to have a sense of what's possible, but also looking at, what do I really want to create in my life? What's the vision? And then how can I practically start moving towards that?
It's probably not only about finding new ways or new mindset, but probably leave the old one and bad ones, sometimes coming from the family background behind, right?
Absolutely. I think that is one of the biggest things that actually holds so many artists back. And it's hard because there's a lot of things in society telling us that it's impossible and that you have to starve. So it's a lot of work to weed through it, but I think that really creates the foundation internally for being successful.
Okay. Can you see any biggest repeating mistake that people do that prevents them from succeeding? And by succeeding, I mean to get into the creative field or business, secure the position and ideally grow.
It's probably a little different for designers versus fine artists.
Yeah.
But I can certainly speak to with fine artists. The biggest thing I see holding them back is this belief that their art is for everyone. It's a sincere desire, and I get it, but at the same time, when you fail to realize that there's a specific group of people who your work is for, and then start pouring your time and energy and resources into finding those people and understanding them and doing some research around it. When you're not doing that, it's like you're just spreading your energy recklessly all over the place, and it's really hard to gain any kind of traction.
Do you think there is some kind of art or work that people do but it just doesn't have any target audience.
Rarely. I'm of the belief that, especially, it's different because I'm not a designer, so I'm fundamentally not starting out making work to satisfy somebody else's need.
Yeah.
So as a fine artist, I think that usually what we're doing on the canvas is something that we're working through, or it's based on a particular perspective or set of life experiences we've had. And most likely there are other people in the world who are thinking about similar things or struggling with it or also engaged with similar things. So I think it would be pretty rare. I mean, human beings are not all that different, right? Especially with the internet now. People are always finding their communities and groups of people who are like them. So I think it would be pretty rare that somebody couldn't find their target audience or their community.
And if we shall talk about, again, basic tips about finding the target audience, like the most simple ones, or the first thing can come to your mind.
Well, I usually say that and I say either your target audience, or I'll even say your divine right audience, or your right people, whatever phrasing works for someone, it's usually a version of yourself. So often they're a lot like you. So that's the best place to start. And then I always encourage people to start asking good questions of people that they know are interested in their work. And from there you can start looking at, okay, what's their demographic? What are they really interested in? How is my work helping them? So starting to do some of that research is really essential.
Okay, now let's move to the coaching or mentoring itself. Can you feel any difference in the next three terms? Teaching, mentoring, and coaching?
Yes, though I don't think the boundary between them is completely clear. So usually when I think about teaching, it's more, I have this skill set or this knowledge and I'm going to pass it on to this person or this group of people. Whereas when I think about coaching and mentoring more, it's also more about developing the person internally and helping to navigate them towards a specific direction. I think ideally a lot of teachers have the coach and the mentor in them and are doing that. But I think that coaching is really less about passing on a particular skill set and helping somebody to identify what's the path they want to take and how can I help them to get there.
In your opinion, the advantage of having a coach or mentor, how it really helps the people?
There's something that's often said in the coaching world that has always resonated with me, and that is that no Olympic athlete gets to where they are without a coach. And I think it's just true that it's really hard to see ourselves objectively and to be our own support person fully or our own cheerleader. So I think that if we really have an idea of where we want to go, it just generally helps to have somebody else on our side, ideally who's been where we are before. And it's like we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can expedite the process and get a lot further if we work with somebody who can help guide us and get us there.
I know that you're focused on the specific group of artists, the spiritual ones. Can you tell something about the right communication and language that you use, or any other mentor or coach needs to use to really help the people?
There's a couple things about this. So I think that, again, it's important to, well, in the business and marketing world, they talk about the know, like, and trust factor. That the people who are attracted to you, they need to also trust you and feel like you're kind of like me, you're my person, you talk like I do, or you move through the world and experience it in a similar way. So I think it's really important when we show up either online or are engaging with a new person, that even through our language and the way we communicate, they feel like, this is kind of my person. I understand what they're saying, so that there's a resonance there. So I think that's really important. But then the other thing that I think is essential that a coach or a guide needs to do, and I like to say that I think the world would be a very different place if we were all asked really good questions. So I think that's one of the greatest gifts we can do as coaches or mentors is ask people really good questions to help them find their own answers. And I think that's a particular kind of way of using language and engaging with people that ends up being really supportive.
So it leads us to the main message of your teaching. What is it?
I was trying to think about this. I think it's really twofold. So I think there's two things. Ideally, we are bringing all of ourselves to our art and our careers, so that it's about really becoming the fullest version of ourselves. And then, so that's kind of the internal piece. And then the external is, like I was saying, be as creative with your art career as you are with your art. Have fun with it. Really start to look at it as an interesting problem that you get to solve, and that you could do things in your career that excite you as much as what you do in your art.
One of the main reasons of this interview is the situation in the Czech Republic about mentors, coaches, and maybe advisors. When these words like advisor or coach is for somebody, it's like a swear word. People doesn't trust coaches, like life coaches. There are so many life coaches here, and advisors. There was this. It has this bad connotation because there were a lot of financial advisors that brought people like literally. So people in the Czech Republic isn't. They aren't used to pay for this kind of stuff, especially in the creative field. It's not common in the Czech Republic. What would you say to help these people understand the value of the coach or mentor?
I think there's a couple of things that it's important to look at the results that people are getting who are working with coaches. And of course, the online world, it's kind of a free-for-all. You have to really sort and weed through, and people can say anything. But I think there's ways to really start looking critically, but also curiously at how is this actually benefiting somebody's life? Is it actually getting them where they want to go? So I think it's important to look at that. But also, I think that in general, if we think about any time we put our energy or attention or really invest in something, my experience is that I always get something out of it. So I think it's also starting to take some of the power and ownership back for the decisions we make. And certainly taking some time to evaluate and do the research and understand, whether or not somebody might be a good choice for you. And everyone has their own decision-making process. But also really recognizing that, every time you've invested in something, have you gotten a return? Because sometimes I think that people also believe that it's all up to the coach.
Yeah.
But anytime I've invested in a coach or with any of my clients, so much of it is dependent on what we put into it and are willing to get out of it.
Yeah. Okay. This is great. Yeah. Do you think that the mentor or coach needs to be top artist or designer to be able to really help the other artists?
I think that it's important that the person you're working with is a couple of steps ahead of you. Meaning, I don't know if it has to be the top, but they should demonstrate that they've already done the thing that you're wanting to do. Because I don't think there's any other way to really gain full experience of how to do it and what comes along with that territory unless you've been there yourself.
So it's connected with the questions how to choose a mentor, what information to look for, or maybe what is the best way to approach a mentor or coach?
So it's pretty common that a lot of coaches will do discovery sessions that are usually free, where you can get on a call and talk to them. So I always recommend doing that, certainly if it's a significant investment. So have a conversation and see how it feels. Now, like I was saying earlier, everyone has a slightly different decision-making process. So I think it's important to know what that is for yourself. Do you benefit from doing a lot of research? Do you make decisions really intuitively? What does that look like for each person? And then also it's really standard for every coach now to have testimonials on their website, and there's usually a name, or you can ask the coach to talk to somebody else that they've worked with, and usually that can be really helpful in the decision-making process as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's super important to have the testimonials. Some mentors used to have their own businesses, but now they are focused only on the coaching and mentoring. In your opinion, is it important for the mentor to be active in the creative business or creative field?
Personally, I think it is, though I don't have a lot of, it's hard to say because I'm kind of at this moment in time where I'm also recognizing how, I feel like my coaching practice and what I've learned has affected my art, and my art affects the coaching practice. And so there's always this kind of dance between the two. And what I need to be doing in terms of either working on paintings or creating a catalog or creating an exhibition for other artists, it's always kind of evolving. So I can understand if there's moments where somebody focuses more on, say, the business side of things or their creative practice. I mean, I really think it's a dance.
Yeah.
But, I tend to also want to be working with people who are always at their edge and pushing themselves into new territory. Right? Because that's the kind of person I want to be. So if it was somebody who's just kind of sitting back and decided that, well, I've learned everything I can, I'm just going to tell others how to do it now, that's not so inspiring to me. So personally, I gravitate towards people who are constantly pushing themselves into new territory.
Okay. And I have last questions about mentors. Do you see a big obstacle when the mentee and mentor doesn't see each other face to face, so they can work via Skype or some online courses or consultations?
I like to think of them as just two very different modalities or approaches to things. So I think that there's pros and cons to each. In my experience, because I do most of my coaching online, I've actually come to love what Skype does, which is it creates this very focused period of time where we know the start time, the end time very clearly. And in my experience, everyone cuts out all of their distractions during that time. So I actually think that you can get a lot done because of that. On the other hand, I also do studio visits where I'll go to see the artists and their work in person. And especially as an artist, it can be very important, obviously, to see the art. Some things don't translate over the internet, but also you do just get a different sense for a person when you're in the same room with them. So I kind of like a combination, but I have yet to really find a disadvantage to doing it over the internet.
Is there anything you would like to leave the listeners with, especially those who feel or they have some lack of knowledge in the creative or business side of their career, but they never thought about searching for help or finding a mentor?
I'm just thinking now of this, it's kind of esoteric, but it really works. I had this professor in college, and he would always say to us, just be curious about that. So, if somebody feels like they have a desire or a dream, I think first and foremost is to recognize that you were given that dream and desire for a reason. There's something about it that is information about the path you're meant to take or who you're here to become. So honor that. There's something important about it. And then start to get really curious about, okay, if this is where I want to go, start asking some great questions like, what would it take to make that happen? Or what kind of support do I need to get there? And start being really open to information and people and all kinds of interesting things coming your way to give you either the next step or the right person along your path. So I think that it is quite esoteric, but I think that it's really about believing that it's possible and then being open to it happening in any way that it can possibly happen.
Great final question. Jessica, thank you very much. It was super great, and I hope it's super important and interesting for the people. Thank you.
You're so welcome. It's been a pleasure.